Hey, I'm here with Alex Sanfilippo today, founder of Podmatch, and I'm super excited to have him on The Gentle Art of Leadership. We're going to be talking all things business and podcasting. Hey, thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Would you make sure to please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel here, and please share this episode with somebody whose life it will make better. Alex Sanfilippo, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Man, we just met. We're new friends.
We are, yeah, you're right. I mean, we met online, but I guess that's not the same as in person, right? I mean, today we met 20 minutes before hitting record.
Yeah, we met on a swiping app that you started.
That needs more definition now, I think.
We should probably dig in, right?
I think so.
Yeah, the wives are here watching.
Yeah.
So somebody told me about Podmatch, and the way they described that was it's like Tinder, which I've never used for podcasting. And I've been on a lot of podcast episodes with what we do, and I went on there and I was like, this is cool. This is really cool. But what I thought was even more cool was right after I sign up, start using it, setting up, super easy, super user-friendly, you reach out. You sent me a custom video from your office. And I just think what you're doing is so cool, man. So you're here from Jacksonville. You and Alicia are here from far away.
Yeah.
Thanks for spending time here.
For sure.
You got an Uber.
Yeah.
We're here.
I had trouble getting here, but we are here now, making it happen. It's funny that you mentioned that. Like I've never used a dating app either. Like you, I've been married too long for those to have even been around. And but we did model Podmatch off of a dating app because we're like, hey, what's someone that does a good job matching the right type of people together? And so we just were like, let's model something off of that. So that's more or less that whole swipe idea, right? We just pulled it from dating apps and said, hey, we can connect guests and hosts together for interviews if they have some commonality. And then, I sent you a video, which I don't do for everybody. A lot of people sign up, and I'm thankful for that. But when I see something that catches my eye, which, Matt, you were one of those people, I'm like, man, this is a cool dude. I was like, let me just send a quick video. So just decided to make it happen. And I'm glad we were able to start a friendship that way.
Yeah. And then we've been videoing back and forth. I mean, that's been our mode of communication. And I'm glad you're here. And I'm just so curious, like your background, what got you into launching, it's a software as a service, which is a very difficult industry to be in from the people that I know that are in it, in a world that seems to be pretty flooded with a lot of podcasts. And I think maybe there's some myths to bust about that. So share your story of leading up to how you got to even starting Podmatch. Like you weren't doing that before, right? You said you were in aerospace.
Correct. Yeah. I guess I was a little bit naive maybe to when it came, I was very green when it came to software. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, this is a cool idea. People haven't done it. I think it'll work, right? And I think that most people who decide to try to start a software feel the same way, and it doesn't work. So bring my faith into it straight up. I mean, I thank God for the opportunity and just the timing being right. I could go into all that forever, right? But at the end of the day, it was a good idea and the timing was right. But before that I was in aerospace. And for anybody watching, listening, don't get too excited. I wasn't a skydiver, wasn't an astronaut, wasn't a fighter pilot. Like I got to give those disclaimers because everyone assumes they see, oh, aerospace, this dude's been on the moon, right? Like, no, I work behind a computer, working commercial operations at a company that was manufacturing parts that focus below the atmosphere. And it was a fun, I liked that career a lot. I did it for 15 years. I worked my way up from part-time guy to full-time on the C-suite level. Thoroughly enjoyed my time in corporate. When I started the software company, was a side hustle. I was like, this seems like cool. I really love podcasting. Let's see where this goes. And the writing was on the wall almost immediately. I was like, I have to make a decision. I'm doing this or I'm sticking with what I'm doing in aerospace. And that's kind of how the whole thing started.
What was the crux of that moment when you made that decision? Why? Like, how did that come about? Did Podmatch really start blowing up?
Yeah.
Or was it just going and growing and you just had to pick between two directions that you had to dig in with?
Yeah, again, super thankful for it. The timing was right. I got the idea for Podmatch while I was speaking at a podcasting conference. So I'd started speaking there, and I'll way oversimplify entrepreneurship. I don't mean to do that, but it's finding a passion, right? Getting into that community. So again, my passion was podcasting. I was a podcaster at that point myself. I got into the community by starting to speak at the conferences, find a simple problem they're struggling with, and then offer the quickest solution you can. And that's entrepreneurship, if you will, like in my mind, just as simple as it can be. And so on March, the dates all get blurry. It was March 10th, 2020 is when I finalized the idea, brought on a partner, a friend of mine who was a software developer, and was like, hey, let's get this thing built. And on June 15th, 2020, we launched. Less than a month after that, we had thousands of people using it. And it had just blown up. And again, I keep on going back to timing. The thing is, think about it. if you think back to June 15th, 2020, that was when pretty much at that point, the whole world had shut down. You had all these amazing speakers that had now lost their platform. Like they didn't have anywhere to go. And a few of these people joined that were charging six figures for presentations, for talking. And they're like, I'm just going to go on podcasts for a while. I found this thing called Podmatch. Is anyone on there? And I'm not like a traditional marketer. I didn't do any ads, just blew up overnight. And it was so fun. My co-founder, Jesse, he's the developer side. I told him I expected maybe 200 people to be using it by the end of summer. And he's like, dude, almost 1,000 people joined last night. He's like,
in a night.
Yeah. And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, are you like paying ads? Do you have like a giant network you didn't tell me about? I was like, no, I don't know where they're coming from. And he's like, well, we didn't build this thing with a foundation strong enough to carry that. So we immediately went into kind of like this fight or flight mode, for lack of a better term, when it comes to software. And that's going back to the decision I had to make almost immediately. Again, I could see the time I was spending at my 9-to-5 corporate job, which again, I loved, hindering the growth of Podmatch or vice versa. It was kind of, I could see that. And it's just, what is it? The person who chases two rabbits gets no dinner type of thing, right? Or tries to hit two birds with one stone. Like, it's just not going to happen. And so for me, maybe there's somebody who could have managed that. I wasn't able to. I had to make a decision.
And March 10th, you say March 10th, 2020, that's literally 3 or 4 days before the world officially shut down.
Okay.
Like, you guys were in Florida at the time.
Yeah.
We're here in Colorado, and you weren't shut down that long. But did that have any effect? I mean, really, with what you're doing, there's probably no effect. Right? You can do everything from home or remote.
Yeah, even the aerospace job. Now, it wasn't a full remote job, but flipping the switch from all working in an office to going remote was very minor for that company. So we actually, I think in February, like, started early, basically like, hey, the essential people that are actually like packing boxes, shipping stuff, they'll be in the office. Everyone else is going home. And yeah, same. So when I flipped to Podmatch, I just basically said, okay, till 5 p.m. when someone has paid for my time, right? Have a job.
Yep. Until
that time, I'll work on that. And then I'll take a break. And then from 6 till 8, I'll work on this, just a couple hours a day. And yeah, so it was really no problem. And me and my business partner, we had known each other for years, but lived out of state. We just really knew how to communicate well. Let's put it that way.
I love that. And then was your wife, Alicia, working with you at the time? Because she is now.
Yeah. At that time, she was helping on the podcast side of things. She actually, this is just, again, God's timing. I feel so blessed. She sold a brick and mortar / online clothing boutique for women that she had in 2019, toward the end of the year.
Okay.
Just someone came in and it was a great opportunity. And so she stopped. She's like, I'm going to take a few months off before I do something. But in the interim, I'm going to help you with your podcast because you're working too much on it. Right. So she kind of jumped in. So yeah, she was helping from day one, just keeping this stuff moving. And she's much more administrative than I am. And in many ways, much smarter than I am. So she was able to like fill in a lot of gaps that I didn't know I had. Let's put it that way.
How is that? Because I know entrepreneurs that work together with spouses. Emily was on the show and she shared, we talked a lot about this back in 2005 when we were first working together. It's much different than how and why we're working together now. So just what kind of tips, what kind of experience share do you have from working with a spouse? How do you turn that off? How do you stop work and then just bring it to home family relationship?
It's intentional is what I'm going to say. I mean, it really is intentional. Like, if you want to lead your family well and lead your business well, like, you have to have boundaries on both sides. And Alicia and I have the opportunity to work together back before we were married, actually. We worked in aerospace together for a little bit, which was pretty interesting. She worked at the same company as me, and we were already, I guess we were engaged at that point. And my only rule was I just couldn't work directly with her. Like, I thought that would be like a healthy boundary, right? Like, as long as we're not working directly together. And like right before we got married, there was a reorg, and I ended up taking over the entire division of the company that she was in. And we ended up sitting about 15 feet away from each other. It's just kind of the way. And it's funny, there's a big enough company that like that wasn't necessarily required, but it just ended up that way. I was like, oh man, okay. We ended up liking it. There was times where I overstepped because you're more comfortable with your spouse, right, than you are with other people.
Yes.
And she made it she just very clearly, like, not in a mean way, but like stern enough that it got my attention, was like, you can't treat me like that. And especially in front of people, right? Like, we had one or two of those situations come up. And that's just when we both intentionally decided, okay, we're going to create boundaries around, do we talk about this when we go home? Does it not come up at all? What does this look like? And we did that earlier on. So fast forward to when we started working Podmatch together, it was the same type of thing of like, hey, when can we even interrupt each other, right? Like, can you just knock down my office or me knock down yours? And so we created office hours from almost day one. So we have, still to this day, we have 2 different times of the day where we'll talk business intentionally. And then other than that, after work, we don't talk about it unless, of course, there was like, we always like going over like the wins of the day. So it'll come back up that way, right? Yeah. But in general, it's not like working all hours of the night. It's just about having good communication, healthy boundaries. And it's worked really well for us.
Did that happen right away? Did that take you a little bit of a rhythm? I'm just thinking of Emily and I, and we get better and better at it every day. And I think we're in a pretty good spot. But was that just pretty easy for you guys to do? Did it take some failures or, hey, we're talking about this at dinner. We're not supposed to be doing that.
Oh yeah. I mean, that still comes up, right? If you're really excited about something, someone's about to release the next day, you're like amped up about it. You can't even, for me, sometimes I can't even turn that off. Right. But again, it goes back to having that communication back and forth of like, hey, all right, let's intentionally not talk about work. How about we talk about this topic instead and bring that up? I think like you and Emily, we're getting better at it as well. It's just, it takes effort, it takes time. Right. And it's one of those things that we just believe in getting 1% better every day. So I believe that we're making that happen on an ongoing basis. So yeah, we're getting better and better at it, but still some room to grow.
Now I'm just curious too, where did you guys meet? Because you said already engaged when you were working in aerospace, but how did you guys originally meet?
We actually originally met at church, and funny enough, it was a church that neither of us actually went to. It was a church that they asked, like, it was friends of friends type of thing that needed help. And they're like, hey, we're launching a new service. We could just use some help from some people who like know a little bit of the biz, right? Yep. For lack of a better term, right? They're like people that can just smile when someone new walks in the door and not be like confusing, right? And that's where I ended up was meeting Alicia. She was already there. Funny enough, we had the same type of car at that point, Mazda RX-8. It's a little side note that we love those cars. And it was an all glass building at the front of it. So I was like, oh man, whoever owns this other RX-8 is here. I'm going to park right next to them. When I walk in, they'll say hi, and ended up being Alicia. And for lack of a better term, for me, it was like love at first sight, which it maybe sounds kind of cheesy. I'm not like into any chick flicks or anything like that or rom-coms. So like I didn't
That's
like
okay if you are, man. Come on, dude.
Just
none.
No, not at all.
All right.
Not at all. Neither is Alicia, which is actually really nice. Nah. But I just remember seeing her and instantly like freezing up. And I was typically like an outgoing guy, pretty good with people. And in that moment, I wasn't. It took me a while to get that connected. But we actually didn't date for a couple of years before then. So we had like a really strong, and I'm actually thankful for this, we had a strong basis of a friendship before there was any sort of, I guess, romance involved, right? So, which was really, again, a gift, I think.
Now, did she fall in love at first sight if we asked her? We can ask over.
We can ask her. She's going to say no, though.
No?
She'll just tell you the truth.
Hey, just want to give a big shout out to one of our sponsors, Imprint Digital. If you're a small business owner, one of the things that you need to navigate to be successful is all things online and digital in terms of marketing and your messaging. Imprint Digital, they're the real deal. They are the professionals and they know this world inside and out. Make sure to visit their website at imprint-digital.com. If you're a Christian small business owner and you live in Northern Colorado, you have to check out one of our sponsors, the Foundry Advisory. The Foundry is a Christian executive peer advising group that connects other business owners in the community to help you focus on your faith, your life, your leadership, and your business. Make sure to check them out at thefoundryadvisory.com. Hey, if you're a business owner and you need to do some renovation in your space or possibly build a building from the ground up, you have to connect with one of our sponsors, Mendel Construction. Mendel Construction is a commercial construction company that's been around since 1997, serving all of Colorado. They can do a small tenant finish all the way up to ground up construction of a new building for your business. Check them out at mendelandcompany.com. That's MENDEL and company.com. A big shout out and thank you to one of our sponsors, M&D Painting and Roofing. M&D was actually founded by my wife Emily and I back in 2005. And for the last 2 decades, we've been here in Northern Colorado of one of the leaders in residential and commercial repainting, as well as most recently installing residential roofs. So if you need to paint, re-roof, you got hit by a hailstorm, we can take care of whatever your home needs from top to bottom. You can find us on the web at mandepainting.com. If your life or business are cluttered up with junk right now, then you've got to reach out to one of our sponsors, Hulk Addicts Hauling. Hulk Addicts can come out to your home or business to do anything from removing junk to appliances. Maybe you're demoing or doing construction on a property and you need it cleared out. Maybe you need a big dumpster dropped off that they can roll off later. Make sure to check them out at hulkaddictsjunk.com. They are serving all of Northern Colorado as well as up and down the Front Range.
I got proof. Here's the proof. I asked her out. This was like 6 months after we knew each other. And her exact response, sorry, Alicia, I know she's in the other room. And she's a super nice, loving person. But her exact words were, "You're too young and you're not my type." And man, that hits the core because you're like, can't change those things.
It's a lot to work
right?
against.
I'm like, can't get older, can't really change won't change who I am, right?
So how does that change?
That's when you'd have to bring her in for that.
Okay.
But
right.
a couple years after that, things just changed, and we had a good friendship, like I said, over that time. And she actually brought it up the next time, and I was like, I would love to do that. But at that point, I had committed to just taking time to really. I was like in a journey of self-discovery. So even when she brought it up, I was like, not now, like maybe later. So it was another 6 months before we actually like really got together, if you will.
And then here we are.
And here we are now, many years later. So that was I met her in 2009. Sorry. Like I said, all the dates get fuzzy. 2009, we were married in 2012.
Awesome. And here you guys are working together, building Podmatch. And one of the things I love about you that really caught my attention is you're bold in your faith. You're not shy about it. You don't hide it. So how does that play into the day-to-day in business?
It's really helped direct the company. Great example is I sent you that video, right? Like when I first saw you, I just believe in following the blueprint that the Bible left for us, even from leadership to business to all those things in podcasting. And I know that even if you look at the life of Jesus, not that he was a podcaster or an entrepreneur directly or any of those things, right? He was a leader though, and he didn't impact directly during his time on earth every single person. Like he didn't stop at every person and stop them, right? But he stopped with as many as he could, and he made sure it was impactful. And so for us, we've just done our best to run our business that way. It's like, how can we really just show that we love people? And that's in our verbiage everywhere. For us, we call our business like human to human is what we call it. So like you're going to talk to a human and you're going to be treated like one. And we just believe that the foundation of that is to love you the way that Jesus does. And we do that with everything. So like we make sure that, again, all of our communication is that way. We even say, we have people occasionally, not often, but we'll reach out in a really harsh, mean way. Maybe they just didn't like the software, and that's fine. Nothing's for everybody, right? But we just look at that as an opportunity to love somebody, because we always say hurting people hurt people, right? And we want to be the person that shows them love, because we might be the only person who does that day. So for me, my faith is so much more than just what I'm sharing here with business and leadership and all that, but it really has directed the way that we've built this company, and the reputation it has is based on that foundation.
Man, I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate when people can really step out in that in the business space.
Yeah.
So where's Podmatch now? What are the big dreams you have? What are you seeing happening in the community for podcasters, hosts and guests?
Yeah, because we focus on both, right? So I have realized podcast hosts will fail. Guests usually don't. And what I mean by that is if you have 20-year experience in something, right, as a guest, you don't just wake up one day and be like, oh, I'm done, right? It's like, no, that's your experience. That's your journey. That's your life. When you're the podcast host is like, I got 10 episodes to edit this month because I'm behind. You might just be like, I'm done. I'll just go do something else. Yeah. And it's extremely common in the industry. So as soon as we launched Podmatch, this is actually the first problem that I noticed. And I thought we had a big issue. So I reached out to my co-founder, Jesse, and I was like, hey man, like people are leaving really fast. I'm like, we have a churn rate problem, which just in the industry just means they come in the front door and they leave out the back door, right?
Yeah.
I was like, there's something wrong with our software. People don't like it. And I was like, but I'm going to get on one-on-one calls with as many people as I can. And I talked to way too many people one-on-one, but so you really only need to talk to 100 to get some real data points, right? But I talked to 1,000, too many. And finally, when I was like, I've heard the same thing over and over again. And almost exclusively, rarely, it would be someone's like, it just didn't work for me, didn't enjoy it, right? And that's fine. Like I said, nothing's for everybody. But the mass majority, the 99%, were saying, I'm not leaving Podmatch. I'm just quitting my podcast. So I'm canceling all my subscriptions everywhere. And just so common. And that's when I initially started diving into, okay, what's actually going on in this industry? And the failure rate in podcasting is unbelievable. Like, I mean, we can get into some of that makes sense. And if not, no worries. But the point is, I realized that there was more that needed to happen within Podmatch. So we started building a community. We started building an educational podcast around it. We've built a few other things around it to be able to really just, again, support people and helping them last as podcasters. So like you said, I'm focused on guests and hosts, but I really focus on keeping the longevity with the host, right? Can they stay? Can we help them stay? Now, if they want to leave, I'm not like going to be like, no, you got to keep it going, right? Like, that's not what I'm trying to do. But when somebody says, I've got a passion, a purpose, a desire to serve somebody, I am going to push back if they just decide they want to quit one day. When you have those three things, it's like, okay, wait, why are you giving up on that then? Like, what's really going on there? And so for me, that's our whole focus is how do we cut down on the industry churn rate?
And that churn rate's just with the host. I mean, you seeing it on the guests too, or was it just a lot of hosts falling off?
Yeah. Again, when you have that 20 or more year experience or even 5-year experience or a story you love to tell, like guests don't usually leave. It's the hosts that are flipping in and out of the industry really fast.
So if somebody's listening to this, they have a podcast, it's just getting going, they're struggling, they're having those doubts, they want to give up, or they're just about to pull that trigger and start. Like, what are some of the, I think you said that what percentage of podcasts have one episode and it's a sound check? Like, share some of maybe those milestones to give to somebody to say, hey, like, if you can just get here, you're way ahead of the crowd. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so 0 to 1 is the majority of I don't actually even know that stat. I don't know how anyone, someone's probably pulled that data. I don't know it, but some people say it's like 80%, 90%. It's a really high percentage. Once you go from 2 episodes to 8 episodes, there's still a 50% chance. That's where I start tracking things, is 2 to 8 episodes. So if you have more than 8 episodes, you've made it further than 50% of podcasters. So that's crazy already, right? Like, it's weird because the failure rate seems higher in podcasting than like even entrepreneurship. It's like, wait a minute, that's a really high failure rate.
That's huge.
Yeah. And then you go to 1 year. So I base everything, all of my numbers I pull is all based off of 1 episode a week. So releasing, that's just the most common cadence. And there's a lot of arguments that have been out there that's like really the best thing for an audience as well. Some people do more, some people do less. So, but that's where I pull the data. So going to 1 year, 50 episodes, 52 episodes, right? There is right now at time of recording, there's just under a 90% chance of failure. So it's like 88% or 89% right now, like that you won't make it. So again, that's actually already making it after 8. So you've made it to 9 episodes, and now to make it to 50, you're looking at, again, another huge percentage.
90% that you fail from 8 to 50.
Yeah.
Or to 1 year if you go once a week.
Yeah. I mean, you compound all these numbers, right?
Yeah.
And then the getting to the 2-year mark, so 100 episodes is kind of that milestone. And interestingly enough, there's a lot of data that I can't explain, a lot of people can't explain, but when you hit that 100 episode mark, that's when meaningful results and traction really start to take off. And I don't know if it's just our expertise as podcasters. I don't know if it's just giving algorithms time to find us or to say this person's going to stay in it. There's one thing I know from a perspective of leadership is that if you stay consistent with something, you get rewarded over time, right? Like consistency always wins. And I think that we're just seeing that. I don't know how to like really quantify that, but getting to that point. So again, meaningful results. I think it takes 100 episodes, about 2 years. And there's less than a 7% chance of making it there after all these other numbers, right? So like the actual percentage, I don't even know, but like it's not a lot. And when I pull the numbers of podcasters that have actually done that and are actively podcasting right now, there's about 35,000.
Well, and that was one of the things, like even for me personally, I get into this, I'm like, I'm another one of the how many millions of podcasts, and you see the data, the stats, there's this many new podcasts that launch a day, but that's the 1 episode sound check or the 2 episodes, and then they shut it down so actively in the world right now. 35,000 that are active.
I call them, so I call that the actively established podcaster. That's just I don't know, for lack of a better term, I liked it. It sounded cool. So that's what I came up with. But I call that's at 35,000 podcasts. And that does exclude shows that are done by big production houses like Disney, Paramount, like they all have their own studios. It's not counting those official podcasts, nor is it counting any celebrity podcasts. So it's like independent podcasters that have reached 100 or more episodes doing interviews. So like very specific, but there's about 35,000 that fit that group. And the mass majority of the influence in podcasting is among those. And obviously some of them have honed things in over time, but you think about it, like that's not a big number. And if you think about all the topics that could be covered, there's a lot of gaps. So between the 3 million that are all podcasts, right? And that's why people are like, oh, it seems saturated,
that's
right?
Where you're scared, right?
Yeah, it's where you're like, oh man, there's already everything. But like, think about, there's only 35,000 people actually doing it. Like, if you have some sort of niche or a topic that you're really looking to cover, is someone else already covering it? Probably not. Now, if you just wanted to say the lifestyle podcast, all things to everybody, like it's probably not going to do very well. But if you have a focus, it can do really well these days.
Yeah, so they talk about the riches and the niches, right? And really, really digging in. Can you over niche?
You can. I haven't seen very many people do it though. And here's why. I use this example when I was talking to a big group in Europe, actually. And I asked, it was virtual, but I asked everyone like, hey, let me know if you think this is a good podcast. I'm like, I got a podcast with 770 listeners. Should I try to grow that podcast? And everyone said, absolutely, yes, yes, yes. I said, okay, this is a fictitious podcast, but this is called American-Based Billionaires. There are only 770 of them. I'm like, why do I want any other listener to this show? And people were like, interesting. Like that was the common response. Like, well, you still want other people listening because they might become a billionaire. I'm like, maybe, but here's the thing. That 770 people, if I have a product or service that interests them, they probably have a budget for it, right? Like
Just a little.
just a little bit of a budget for it, right? So that was my point, is just like, hey, you probably can't. And I've met some people that do even more, that they're looking for 500 people to listen to their show. Which interestingly enough, going back to the data again, a lot of people get discouraged in podcasting because we're conditioned by social media numbers. So we look at like, oh, I got 30,000 views on this video on TikTok, right? Or I got this and this. It's not apples for apples. You can't compare podcasting to social media. And I'm not trying to dog social media. It has its place. It's just not the same thing.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be watching a video of you, Matt, or like even a clip that you post, I can be laying down in bed, not paying attention, and click on it, double tap it, scroll right past it. All that counts as some form of engagement, right? And I guess technically a podcast could as well, but in general, people don't start a podcast just to stop it, move on. They start to listen. So to me, again, the comparison is not the same, because to me, a podcast is like people sitting in seats. It's the same as you being on a stage and people watching. Yeah. And I had somebody the other day tell me they don't want to be on any podcast with less than 100,000 people listening every week. And I just asked, they're a public speaker, and I was like, when's the last time you spoke on a stage with 100,000 people in the room? And they got super offended by that and left and thought that was just an inappropriate question. But my point is, man, if you've got 30 or 40 people listening, if I told you, Matt, like right next door, we have a room with 30 people who want to hear your exact message, and I call you up on the phone, you're going to be there every day of the week. Any chance you get, you're going to go for it. Because you're like, yeah, 30 people that want to hear what I have to say. Absolutely. And so we have to think of that as our podcast. So again, even sharing that 770 number, if you were to reach that, you're in the top 5% of all podcasts. Because once you reach 450 people listening every week, that puts you in the top 10% of all podcasts. Just to give you an idea of where it's at. But again, imagine a room with 450 people in it. That's huge.
That's a lot of people.
It's a big room. Yeah. So I think that we just have to have our mindset right as well, because I find a lot of people quit way too soon because they're like, oh, only 50 people are listening. I'm like, that's amazing. Yeah, if that's 50 people you can impact, come on, that's huge.
Our first episode, I think, got 50 downloads. But I'm like, that's there forever. And people are going to keep coming back to that.
For sure.
And that grows. Like that keeps going.
Yeah.
What are some other missed or misunderstood metrics? Because even as you're talking through that and explaining that, I'm in my own head, right? Like how many? Oh, yep, okay, views, and like views don't mean anything a lot of times, right? It's great, right, but what does that translate to for what you're trying to do, who you're trying to serve?
Yeah.
But where else are hosts missing some information? Like what are some other gaps, or maybe some other mistakes they make, or just information you wish they would know to just keep them going, especially for the purposeful ones?
Yeah.
Right? That are in it for the right reasons and really trying to make an impact.
Yeah. The first thing I always share on this point, I think it's just so important to cover, is that you have to talk to your listeners. And a lot of people make the excuse, I don't know how to find them. Man, if they engage anywhere on social media, if they email you, if you can see someone sharing about it somewhere, like just reach out and be like, hey, any chance we can get a quick 5-minute video conference call going? And just to learn a little bit more about them. And I'm telling you, if you can talk to 20 listeners and you actually like log the data, if you will, right, of like what they said and be very intentional with it, you can learn how you're actually impacting people. And when I first started my podcast, this was years ago, I had one called Creating a Brand. That's what kind of got me into podcasting. And I was just doing it wrong. I didn't know. And then I started talking to listeners. I started tweaking it based off what I was learning. Not every person's advice was getting taken, but in general, I could see, okay, well, the last 10 people I talked to all said the exact same thing. Let me try that. And it always changed into something that I could see was impacting more lives and impacting, maybe not even more lives, but the lives I was impacting in a more meaningful way. And so the first thing I say is talk to your listeners. Find out what is really going on in their head and see where you need to course correct a little bit, because we all need to. Beyond that, the actual data, I find there just to be two really important metrics. We all look at top download numbers, right? And I don't really think that that's a valuable metric, because again, if I have a podcast about everything for everything, I might get more listeners than a podcast that's really narrow focused, but does that matter, right? So what I look at is two things. Number one is completion rate. So if you log into Apple or Spotify or any of the big ones, I'll try to make it too technical. It'll tell you how long on average people make it into your podcast before they drop off. That is a good indication if you're talking too much or if there's a segment you have in there that everyone wants to leave for, or if people are fast forwarding it through the first 15 minutes because it's all ads, like, right? Like you can learn all that stuff. And going back to the data, what people were telling me is that my podcast was a little bit too long. They were listening on their commute. They were 55-minute episodes. And I'm not saying that number is not, this is my audience. Each audience is unique and different. For me, that was too long. And also, I'm not that interesting for that long, right? So, and I learned that. I dropped it down to 35 minutes. I went from a 70% completion rate to a 99% completion rate.
Yeah.
Super happy with that. The other thing, if you do want to track like the fans that you have, quote unquote, I'll just say, right? Like the fans, you can look at your downloads just in the first 7 days. Because I would think that a fan would find your new episode if you're releasing one a week within the first 7 days. So just look at the end of that number, the end of that time with your podcast hosting provider, how many people are listening. You can track that number later on your own spreadsheet or something and see if it's climbing or dropping. Those two metrics to me are really the only things that you need to look at.
Yeah, love it. I love it. Now tell me about PodScore, because we were talking about that a little bit offline. I'm excited to dig into that. Yeah,
man. This is kind of like, I don't know how to... I try my best to always be humble. So I'm trying to figure out how to say this without sounding like I mean it in the most humble way I possibly can. This will be the mark that I leave in the podcasting industry. If there's a legacy for Alex and Alicia in podcasting, it's PodScore. It's not even Podmatch. Like that's a great service that I always promote. And like, that's my bread and butter. But PodScore is really the thing I think will make an impact. And it came from a conversation I had during that 1,000 people I talked to that were quitting, right? Some of them saying like, oh, well, I might give it a shot. Hey, what remote recording software should I use? I do all my interviews remote. What should I use? I need to switch away from Zoom. I'm like, oh, I wrote a blog post on it. Here's 7 different things. I just sent to him. We're on a call and he goes, dude, can you just tell me which one to use? He's like, I'm so tired of all these lists and all this research I have to do. And I was like, oh, yeah, use this one. This is the one I use. He's like, okay, do you have like a discount code? I was like, yeah, here. He goes, cool. That's all I wanted. Thank you. And like, I got off that call. Like, there was no like real, like, it wasn't angry or anything like that. But I got that call. I'm like, huh. I'm like, I write a lot of stuff and all these blogs are 20 ways to do this, 10 ways to do that, but it's not individualized. And we're talking about co-founder Jesse. And I was like, hey, what we're doing with matching, I think that's going to be the future of the internet. Like the Googles of the world. I think at some point it's not the 20,000 results. It's going to be, here's the one thing that you say you're looking for. And here's how you do it the fastest possible way. And from that moment on, we called it, instead of information, people were now seeking transformation. Yeah. So I just called it the transformation age that we're really like stepping into. And AI has really proven that with how many people have adopted it. Because listen, you can find the same stuff on how to be a better writer. You can go to Google and type that in right now, and it'll give you 1,000 ways to be a better writer. But now people are just saying, can you make this better? Done, right? Yeah. Which I don't know if that's really mentally healthy for us necessarily. I'm not going to get into all that. But in general, we are now at an expedited rate seeing the shift of going from, hey, I need more information to now I just want transformation. Help me get from where I am to where I want to go. And so the whole idea behind PodScore is, can we somehow individually hold the hand of every podcaster and give them exactly what it is that they need, exactly where they're at, without going general at all? When I start talking to people in the industry, like, you're going to lose all your money. That's going to cost too much. Like, you're not going to get any money out of this. Like, how are you going to be able to do that? So what we did is we built a really an advanced quiz that'll tell you 3 things. One, what type of podcaster you are. So podcaster personality type. I modeled it off of Strength Finders. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
We love DISC and human motivators, but very, very involved and understand that. So you're building that on the back end to type them.
So that was actually really fun for me. I'm a learner, so I love to learn things. So learning how to develop a personality quiz and actually identify different personality types in the process was really, at first, difficult, because I was like, how do you even start? So I just started going to all these personality tests and kind of breaking down how they're doing it. And anyway, figured out that there's actually 12 different personality types of podcasters, and put that into the quiz. So the first thing you get is your personality type. The second thing you get is your exact % chance of making it as a podcaster. We shared all that data earlier, right? So that the reason that's also fresh is because I'm looking at it all the time to make sure this whole quiz, if you will, is accurate. At the end, it'll say, hey, basically, based off what you're doing now, what you told us, you have a 35% chance of making it. Just so everyone knows, I didn't hit 100. I got 41%.
You did?
Yeah.
Personally?
I did.
The founder of this thing, 41%.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
I started looking, I'm like, oh man, this can't be right. And I started looking, I'm like, no, I'm not following a lot of best practices right now, but it's because I'm running a software company. I'm like, that's an excuse. And that's talked about here, right? Like, and it was very interesting to see that, even not that I'm like trying to toot my own horn of like, oh, I should have scored higher. But the fact is, it's accurate enough to tell that even me, the person who could try to gamify it, that I'm still not doing things all right. And no one will ever get it all right. It's all about 1% better every day, right? Like I shared earlier. But anyway, so that's the second thing, gives you that exact percentage chance. And the third thing it tells you is based off how you answer everything, exact things you need to do to improve that score, along with direct resource links to the transformation you're seeking. So an actual lesson about it. So if you're saying I'm using, what's an example here? Like you're not very confident in your ability to speak, it sends you straight to something to learn how to step up in your ability to speak like really fast. Just like, hey, here's exactly what you can do.
Yeah.
Here's how you get rid of the filler words, right? And so it'll only push you to what you need instead of saying, cool, now go through this course. There's 150 lessons, enjoy, right? Like, because you don't need, for me, I didn't need 60 or 40% of it, right? I needed the other 60% of it, but it'll tell me exactly what I need to focus on first to improve those chances. Yeah. And so that's what we built with PodScore. A lot of mentors told me, don't do this for free. But I was like, you know what? Like, I do recommend Podmatch. So if you tell me you're using like Instagram DMs to find your guest, it's going to suggest Podmatch, right? That's one of the things to help you get more efficient. So like that's how I'll monetize. But in general, I just felt like a real calling to make this completely free to really serve the industry. And the whole idea is, can we cut back on churn rate of the industry, people quitting? And so that actively established podcast category, as I talked about earlier, like that 35,000, my goal is to increase that by 8,000 by June 15th, 2025. And I believe this is the vehicle to make that happen.
Now, how long has PodScore been out? Because it's relatively new.
Oh yeah, a couple weeks at time of recording. So yeah.
Wow. Well, what else is in store? Where else do you vision taking this?
Yeah, I'm going to really focus my time on working on that. And when I say working on that, now I'm going after partners. My dream with this, and I've gotten a handful of the hosting providers to agree to this. The hosting providers, for anyone who's like not a podcaster, that's how your podcast, that's how you listen to this or watch this, right? It goes on a hosting provider who automatically syndicates it to Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, all like thousands of directories so that Matt doesn't have to go click, right? You don't have to do anything.
One button, it goes out.
It does it for you. So I've started building partnerships with them because they're the ones that know of podcasters. I don't think I can help a podcaster before they have 8 episodes. It's after that. And so what I've been working on with the hosting providers, I've never actually shared this before, but it seems to be doing well so far. So my time is spent building these relationships where they will automatically email hosts when they release their 8th episode saying, hey, congratulations on 8 episodes. Only 50% of people make it that far. You got enough data now to find out what type of podcaster personality you are. Why don't you take this quiz real quick? Again, there's no downside. And I've had a few hosts kick back because like, well, it's not ours, so we don't want to do it, right? Doesn't have my name on it. There's no way to know who actually owns it. Let's put it that way. But what it does do is help podcasters podcast for longer. I'm like, if we can do that for them, they win. And as a result, we win as well. Right.
And
like,
you guys do.
Yeah. So that's kind of the future of what I'm doing on that front, if you will. And then of course, Podmatch has some objectives as well.
Yeah. And then what's the percentage of hosts versus guests that you have on there? On your platform?
Yeah. We try to run about 50-50.
Okay.
Keeping it about the same. Right now, at time of recording this, we're just not coming out of the slow season for podcast hosts. Every summer there's a dip. And so we did have like a little bit of a dip in that. So I don't know exactly what the numbers were, but they're very close to getting back to that 50-50. And we just find that's a good spot. It makes it so there's enough outreach, but not too much, right? So it's kind of like the sweet spot.
Yeah, I met just some interesting, just amazing people on there. Yeah.
Yeah. There really are some incredible people. Like it blows my mind. Just like sometimes I just go through profiles and that's like how you end up with a video from me is because I was like, who's this Matt guy? Like, is he a real person? Like, how does someone do all this? Right. So I'm like, I'm just going to say hi and see if he'll talk to me. Right. So that's kind of how it started.
But talk about the power of that too, because it's so lost with all of the efficiencies and automations and AI now and wherever that goes. Right. But just getting a custom made video. I love doing those. When I got that, I love that. I think, we're videoing back and forth.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't see that a lot. I mean, talk about just the power of that and how you've seen that impact at least your business. And you see anybody else that's doing that? Because I think there's real power in that. We're just missing this real human connection as we go on, and it seems to be progressively, exponentially magnifying.
Yeah,
everything's automated. There's no more of that.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of automations. I'll be real. It sounds weird for me being a software guy to say that. And I use some tools to automate the administrative side of things. I don't like to automate communication with people. And again, if you look at our core values on our website, number 1 is human to human. And that there'll never be a chat bot. Although there's a lot of people who are like, wow, you could really save hours a day if you do that. I'm like, no, we always want when somebody reaches out to hear from a human. And I'm all about practicing what I preach. So for me, again, I can't send everybody a video, but I can send to a few people that really catch my eye that like seem very interesting to me. So I tend just to send a few of them because I always want to put into practice remembering, hey, we're a human first business. We're software, yes, we're all digital, but we want people to have a human experience. And it's really important to us. As a matter of fact, like Alicia sometimes will have people send a support ticket in and it's straight to the point, maybe a little bit harsh. And then she'll respond and be like, oh, I didn't know I'd actually like talk to somebody, right? Like, and that's people are like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be like rude. I just didn't know that there was a human working here, right? And it's really common. And again, I'm not a huge fan of that because I just think that the businesses that can figure out how to do this human to human thing really well are going to be the ones that thrive in the future because people are longing more than ever for some sort of connection with another person. And the world is pushing us further and further away from that. Think about it. People are more lonely and isolated than ever before. If we can help you not feel that way, we're going to do it. We're going to find a way to. And even if that means our costs are a little higher or we can't respond within 15 minutes, right? Like, then so be it, right? Like, if anything, people might just appreciate the fact, oh, I'm sorry, I was on my lunch break, right? People might appreciate something like that.
And I think there's as much as we think we want that efficiency and that quick answer. I think, well, I'm willing to wait. I mean, what's the feedback from the people when maybe they wait a little longer, but they get you, they get Alicia, they get an actual person. Because Emily and I, we were just talking about this, just all of the communication. It's always personal. It's always straight, direct between us. Do you have anybody that pushes back on that? Or do they all tend to appreciate it at the end of the day?
The productivity experts, like and automation experts, like obviously it's kind of where hard to. They push back really quick, and they're like, "Hey, you're leaving money on the table." I'm like, "It's okay. If I can make someone feel like a human, I'll happily leave money on the table, right?"
Yeah.
But in general, and sometimes we get people that are just like, and this is the one thing that frustrates Alicia. They'll send like 5 emails like over a 4-hour period of time or 5-hour period of time. It's usually while we're sleeping. So they're like in another country. Like, I can't believe I still haven't heard back. What's wrong with you all? Is anyone even working here? And here's the thing we always say.
We're asleep, dude.
This is a side note. And we'll say that. We're like, hey, sorry, we're sleeping, right? Like we're in Jacksonville, Florida. We're in a different time zone. But I always say to people, I'm like, man, we work in podcasting where nothing is ever urgent because no one will ever die because of something podcasting related, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny when I tell people that, like some people apologize, like, hey, I'm so sorry to me, week to back to you. I'm like, yeah, don't sweat it. I'm like, we're in podcasting, right? And that, like, when it's another founder, like, wow, I really appreciate that perspective. I'm like, yeah, why have this crazy sense of rush and urgency? As a matter of fact, the best content happens when you're not like rushed. And you know, a perfect example, Matt, is me getting here today. We talked early on about having trouble getting an Uber to get over here, right? Like staying in a town over. And I like walked in like feeling like, oh man, I'm already late and this dude's got a busy schedule. And you walked in, like I walked in so calm. You're like, oh, let me show you the place. Yeah. And instantly brought me back to that, right? Yeah. I think that we need to get out of this idea of hustle, urgency, fast, and trying just to improve in those ways all the time. And sometimes just stop and be like, hey, so take a look at my place I got here, right? Like you and Emily did. Like that was a great thing. And like it made for a better podcast episode because we're like, okay, hurry up. We got to get in here. We got to record, right?
We got bright shirts, man.
We got bright shirts. Come on. I brought Florida. I mean,
you got 4 button pops though. That's a lot of pops.
You know, so Alicia's next door. This is totally, you all can edit this out if you want, or we can leave it.
We keep it pretty real and raw here.
I used to button up to like where you're at. And then I got comfortable doing one more, and Alicia always pushes for this one.
She does.
Always.
Emily's probably telling me to button this one up, and I just did it.
Everyone's different, but Alicia's like, and sometimes we'll be out in public, and she'll just be like, unbutton one. I'm like, fine. So I'm just working to get comfortable with it. I'm not quite there yet, but here we are.
I love it. This is going to go out to the world forever. It's going to be there forever, man. It's going to be there forever.
This is a confidence boost for me. I got to.
So a couple of things that you said. I mean, the biggest one is just that human to human connection in business and putting people first and doing things on purpose, with purpose. We have a lot of business owners, business leaders listening to this. What other big values are you running? What are other big things, core concepts that you would just want to give to a business owner that's listening in? Because those are huge. But what else are you guys doing that just we forget as business just evolves at this too rapid of a pace?
Yeah, this human to human idea, real quick, I'm going to go back to that just for a second. I call it doing things that won't scale. Me sending videos will not scale. If Podmatch 10Xs today, I can't send more than the 10 videos a week that I like to send. I really can't. So it's doing things that don't scale and being okay with the fact that it won't scale. I think that that's a really important thing. Like when you're thinking any sort of human to human business, you have to just say, you know what, this little thing right here might not scale, but I'm going to just I'm just going to keep on doing it because it does serve somebody. Immediately with that is that next core value that we have, which is we just call it seek to serve. We seek to serve the people that we are helping. And so for us, that's podcasters. People kind of think it's a little weird sometimes because they're like, man, you're like really passionate about podcasters on either side of the mic. And it's true. That's the people that we feel that God has put us on the earth to serve right now. I'm like, and sometimes I've even told people, I'm like, I feel like a missionary sometimes. People are like, what? You're not like going anywhere. I'm like, no, but like I talk to people from all around the world and I might be the only light that they see today. Might be the only love they experience today. And that to me is like kind of the definition of the whole thing, right? So for us, like seeking to serve is just so, so important. We always put everything through that lens. Like we're going to do our best to respond kindly, to make our products and services better for our members and our community, because that's how we can serve better. And we're always looking for ways to do that.
I love it, man. I'm honored that you're here in the studio today. And as a podcaster on both sides, right now, a host and a guest, what would you give as just a final piece of advice to just a host in the hosting world, and then a guest, maybe that's just doubtful, that's weary, that's struggling, that just hasn't hit it yet?
Yeah. I actually wrote this down, if that's okay for me to read this.
Well, after that, we were going to actually get right to that. No, so that's perfect. But if you want to share, if that's what it
goes
is,
along with it, man.
Let's do it.
I wrote these words down before we started, and it's do for one what you wish you could do for all. And I think that if all of us as podcasters on either side of the mic could get this in our heads of doing for one what we wish we could do for all, we'd be doing a much better job. Here's one, I hear this all the time. I just want to change the world. And people have the word like just in there. I'm like, just change the world. Like, okay, it's simple, right? That's so much pressure. Like think about that pressure we're putting on ourselves. So as a guest, like as new authors maybe, or someone who's really stepped into further leadership on again, either side of the mic really, saying, I've got big aspirations. I got all these things I want to do. I want to change the world. Like it's so much pressure. It's so much easier to say, if I can find that one person who needs my message most today and serve them, check. Today was a win. And I just think that if we can have that perspective in content creation and showing up in our businesses in the way we lead, sure, we might not be able to change everyone's life, but hey, if we changed one, like, is that not worth it? Right. And so that's really what I like to tell people. I'm like, stop focusing so much on the numbers. Stop focusing on the reps that you're getting, like being a guest on 100 podcasts in a week, right? Like nothing crazy. Just think, is what I'm sharing going to actually help make someone's life better? Is it going to do that? Because the thing is, if each of us, you and me and everyone we know, impacted one life and made it better every day, the world would be a very different place tomorrow. And so I just want to make sure that everyone knows, like, don't put so much pressure on yourself. Seek to serve the one person who needs you most.
Alex, you are a truly amazing human, man. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being on the show. That is a wrap.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Are you ready to make massive breakthroughs in your leadership? And do you want to do so in a really unique way? You should consider coming to Spain with me. April 27th to May 4th of 2024, I am hosting the Ultimate Immersion Experience in Spain. I'm taking a very small group of business owners and business leaders over to Spain for the fun, sun, food, culture, and cuisine of the country. But more importantly, we are going to be putting together some very intentionally crafted adventures, challenges, and experiences to massively push you out of your comfort zone and learn about your own leadership in a very unique way. Go to mattshoup.com, click on the Travel to Spain with Matt button, and check out the Ultimate Immersion Experience.